Michael Hoffman, joining us newly from completing his STI program, newly in the Dragos shirt. He is also a ICS instructor in development, helps us with so many things. A wonderful person. Most in this group will be very familiar with Michael, all the way back to when we ran these ICS summits for a decade or more, and really started to focus on developing an industrial control system specific curriculum. And Michael, in his role at a multinational oil organization, was involved in the kind of scoping of, these are the types of courses we need. And more importantly, these are the types of credentials and certifications that we would be looking for people who are coming to do work in these environments. And really kind of working with us as we worked across industry, multiple sectors, and sort of identifying what are those common skill sets that need to be foundational for people to work in these spaces. So Michael has been there from the beginning with us on our SANS journey of courseware development, of delivery, of certification development, identifying what the industry needs. I've had the opportunity to work with him in courses, in a variety of different kind of exercises. Just an amazing individual and contributor to the community. Performs a number of kind of DIY, and his last talk here last year, kind of a discussion around different experiments and kits, and doing some awesome stuff with our courseware and student kits to make some do-it-yourself coffee roasters and a number of other things that people have been able to download and use those project files and just kind of build their own home ranges and the ability to analyze data and understand it really well. Today, he's going to be covering a couple of things that are near and dear to his heart from his career, and currently where he is focused a lot of his effort and attention in his role at Dragos. He's going to be covering OT visibility and kind of collection of assets within an operational environment, with a goal of developing that strategy and developing kind of a focus on prioritizing what matters from an operational perspective, looking to the crown jewels, looking to high consequence events. How do you take and consume all of this data once you have that visibility, and then add a framework around it to prioritize events of interest? Michael, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to see you and hear your presentation. So I turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim. Let's see if I can get control here. Presentation. All right. Well, yeah. So just want to quickly shout out for all the players yesterday on the CTF. I know a lot of folks today are caffeinated up because of 12 hours of a CTF, and so just again, shout out for all the effort that went into that. It was actually my first time helping out develop out a CTF, and also getting into really into that environment and kind of seeing the magic happen from the back end. So yeah, just a little bit about myself. Of course, 20-some years in oil and gas, really in the ICS space. Kind of came up from the boots level, from the plant floor as a technician into automation. And then of course, as we began to connect all of our systems together, security became very paramount. And for me, that was just really a strong focus. And so, of course, yeah, as Tim described, I already have gone through the master's degree program with a focus on ICS security, collected a couple certifications along the way, and very much excited to be helping out in a lot of the SANS ICS courses and curriculum. Definitely a passion of mine, and a passion to really train up the community and the next cybersecurity specialists. So just a little bit about this presentation. Really what I wanted to do is, a lot of times we talk about different frameworks or different methodologies or use cases, if you will, in an island or islanded off. And so what I wanted to do in this presentation is really pull together a couple of different ways of thinking. And so specifically around Mitre attack. So Mitre attack, of course, was introduced last year. Definitely a lot of focus in that. I think there still should be a considerable amount of focus in that area. So I want to really highlight that again. Going into crown jewel analysis, where we're talking about what is that most critical system in our environment, and then kind of tying it all together with collection management frameworks, and that understanding of what do I have out there in my visibility, where do I need to go in that visibility strategy. And so when I think about this, kind of alluding to a lot of the other presentations that have just happened, and also think about, as from my experience, from a boots on the ground experience, taking care of those DCS systems, those advanced control systems, historians. For me, one of the major concerns that I had in my environment is that one question. And that one question was, am I compromised? I remember so often where I would have equipment outages or those kind of things where, I'd have a DCS controller go offline. I would have advanced control system drop due to, spurious activities. But I never had the proper visibility in the environments to really know. So, I could tell the plant managers and so forth that, hey, this was just an anomaly or this could have been malicious. I didn't have that visibility. And again, this has been brought up numerous times today about having that visibility or that awareness inside our plants. And so that's really the goal of this this presentation, is really to provide you some levers that you can go back to your companies, your environments, and to begin to implement some things to get that visibility for you. Now, one of the first things to do, so how do we start? Really, the first thing is to know what we have. And so this is, it's easier said than done. So first of all, of course, it's from the network perspective, or so, what does our networks look like? And then it's really from architecture. Is our systems architected properly? And I know a lot of times we get systems through mergers and acquisitions and so forth. We'll get a new plant or a new environment, and we're completely unfamiliar with it. So one of the first things we have to do is understand what we have. How are we architected? Do we have the current asset inventory in place? And a lot of times that comes from going out and doing that work. But this can also be flipped around tool, is once we kind of understand our architecture, we can put tools in place to help us get that asset inventory, to help us get that visibility. And so this is fundamentally the first things we have to do. And again, it's easier said than done. But I want to give you a stepwise approach really to do this for your systems. And this is kind of the three stages of the talk. Is first of all, identifying those crown jewels. What is most important to us? Again, Andy and others talked about the CCE, consequence-driven cyber-informed security, as a way to do this. Crown jewel analysis is a different method. It's very, very similar, a little bit higher level, nevertheless, very, very similar in concept. The next thing you do is you definitely want to review those documented tactics and techniques. And this is where the Mitre attack comes into play. Being able to leverage what has already been done in the industry, leverage some of that threat intelligence, that awareness, the activity groups, how they're working in our vertical space, and really apply that to us. Instead of asking that question, could it happen to us? Or, we can actually go out and understand, yeah, it's happened in a similar industry, a similar vertical, and we can apply that to that knowledge and awareness to our own companies. And then it's finally, identifying those optic capabilities and aligning with those specific tactics and techniques. CMF, we'll talk about that in a minute. So first of all, let's get into crown jewel analysis. And this is really about focusing on that most critical aspect of our plants and our environments. This is a picture of a refinery that I spent a number of years in my career at. I knew it very, very well. That's where I did a lot of that DCS work that I was just describing. But in that plant, there's a lot of things around there that things can go wrong, and that I've actually witnessed. And so a lot of times people focus on the process or that hydrocarbon process, if you will, of your refinery. But I've witnessed many, many times that the utilities or those common areas spread throughout the plant are often those areas you will really want to focus on. If you use these different utility sections like utility or electrical feeds, instrument air and plant air, for example, for your control and shutdown valves, steam systems to drive your turbines and all those kind of things, and to heat, cool towers, so forth. All of those type of processes, if you lose those, you're going to have a full plant outage immediately or within 5 minutes. I've witnessed this before where we lost plant air in the plants further away from the air header will begin to slowly die off. And it's just as painful, total plant shut down over a couple of minutes, and you can just watch it happen. So those are those areas that, yeah, I've experienced that from a process upset or an impact, but you can also take the lens onto that cyber impact of this as well. Now, how do we do this? Well, first of all, so this is kind of the overall methodology, if you will. So I touched on the instrument error system example. And this is how you would actually go do that in your plant. And so you can take this methodology with you back to work next Monday or to your virtual environment next Monday and begin to think about this process. So first of all, we have an overlying critical system or subsystems. So this is really, so I've talked about a refinery. Okay, let's take this as an overarching example. And now we want to dig into the underlying system. So let's go into the boiler house. This can also be called a steam plant. We also call ours the house of power. Whatever you want to call it, that's that one function normally has all your utilities for the plant. Then we step down into some of the other critical areas of that area we're wanting to focus on. And again, doing the crown jewel analysis, it requires a multidiscipline team. So, irrespective of your amount of knowledge in that system and your environment, it's always good to have operational staff in here. It's good to have engineers, process engineers, the equipment engineers, and so forth around a table and walking through this, because it's really easy to or think that you have a good aspect, but until you ask somebody on an operations side, they know this equipment well. They've been working on this for maybe 20 years, and they know their plant. Leverage that knowledge and technical ability. So first of all, we look at instrument air, the pressure control system and dew point for our critical system. Now let's look at some of the critical components. So to get instrument air, you have to have a compressor. Then you also have a pressure control station for that critical component of, controlling your instrument air. And then you have to have an air dryer. If you produce wet air over time, your valves, your air systems will begin to rust out and you'll have a lot of failures. So those are some of the key areas for that instrument air system. Now underneath there, we find on the controller level is where we actually get that interface between logical systems and physical systems. And this is where the controllers come into play. So here you may have a vibration monitor for your for your compressor, monitoring the health of your machine, your rotating equipment. DCS system may be controlling the pressure over your control valves and so forth. You're probably going to have a dryer PLC that's controlling the function of your air dryers, for instance, and you're also going to have a dew point analyzer that's measuring the amount of the dew point or the dryness, if you will, of that air. And then we look at the actual crown jewels, so those areas that we really need to protect. So we've identified these controller systems, and now we go into the crown jewels. Well, the crown jewels are those areas, again, that from a cyber perspective, we want to be looking at, and we want to make sure we have that preventative, detective, and responsive / recovery measures around that. So we have the vibration monitors, PLCs, again, for the dryer skid, DCS system, definitely a DCS system. Analyzers, of course, a lot of analyzers these days actually have Ethernet capability and communications. Then we get down into that remote access place and also the firewalls, those paths of communication coming in. So all those areas are really what we need to identify as the crown jewel, because if we lose instrument air, the whole plant goes down. Now, getting into this a little bit more though, so okay, now that we've identified our crown jewel, there's a little bit more to this that we need to be working out. So next, we take that wonderful work that the community and also Mitre has put together on the Mitre ATT&CK for ICS framework, the matrices. And so if you're just coming into this, and I've noticed that we have an awesome group of new folks coming into the ICS space, a lot of you also may have a lot of knowledge around Mitre ATT&CK for the enterprise, but Mitre ATT&CK for ICS really is that collection of known tradecraft. It's that known tactics and techniques from different adversarial groups and those kind of things that has happened and gone on in the past. And we can learn a lot from this. So, so definitely recommend getting into this a lot more. Now, again, this is support of not only the of Mitre, but community as well. And I'll kind of show you some examples of that going forward. Now, there are 3 mappings that exist. There's the ICSs, which we'll be covering, the enterprise mapping, and then mobile. Mobile's a little out of scope for this one. IoT coming in the line, maybe that's important down the road. But one of the things I want to talk about really quick is that as we talk about the Mitre ATT&CK for ICS, we need to be thinking also about kill chains and really about how attacks work. And so first of all, we talk, and I'm focusing on Mitre ATT&CK for ICS, but a lot of attacks, I'd say most attacks occur from the enterprise side coming down in. So we need to understand that stage 1 to stage 2 attack coming down in. And so stage 2 is really where the Mitre attack for ICS comes into play. But there's an overlay actually between the actual enterprise side and the Mitre side, and that actually happens around the functional level 3 system, if you will, from the Purdue model that's been discussed. Now, going into that a little bit, Mitre attack for ICS is kind of what it looks like from the example here. We see this is just a screenshot from their webpage, but we see the tactics going across the top, those goals that the adversary is trying to achieve, and then the underlying techniques on how they're actually going to do that. And again, they can be using, from the initial access, of course, this is already taken into account that they've compromised that enterprise side, and now they're coming into the environment. Again, we see like data historian compromise from maybe a trusted data historian connection, engineering workstation compromise, so forth. Then we see that normally an adversarial group will move to that different point to execution, to persistence, to evasion, and so forth, all the way over to that actual process impact, where they can actually have damage to property, denial of control, denial of view, and so forth. Now, you may be going, okay, this is nice, but what can I do with this now? Well, the next example here is really, first of all, there's a lot of rich information as you begin to explore the Mitre attack. So here we get into, like engineering workstation compromise. As you begin to dig down into this is where you're going to find all those good, that leverage that knowledge from past attacks. So here we see like on the engineering workstation compromise, there's a great description of it. Different examples from, like Stuxnet, okay, that S word for the second time today, Triton malware, which is a Xenotime group leverage and so forth. And then you can also see the mitigations for each one of these areas as well going forward. And mitigations came into play, I think, I think last fall of 2020. So again, this is continuously being built out. Now, with that said, though, this is really where the Mitre attack for ICS comes into play, when you can begin to overlay different adversarial groups. So this one, like I've mentioned before, is Xenotime, where they attacked, attacked the refinery in Saudi Arabia in 2017 to compromise a safety controller. Now, when you begin to overlay the activity groups or those behaviors from this specific adversary, this is really where this comes into play, where you can kind of take this and look at, okay, so if I'm in a certain vertical that this activity group is targeting, now I can begin to take this information, internalize it, and say, to begin to answer that question that I posed in the beginning of the talk, where am I compromised? Could I detect this type of activity in my environment? And a lot of times when we begin to understand this, there's maybe some challenges where maybe our monitoring and our detection capability is not there. That's okay, but this does provide a nice place that we can that handle, if you will, that we can turn to move forward in our strategy for detection. So with that, now let's get into the collection management framework. So we've already identified our crown jewels, and that's really the first thing about a collection management framework is it allows you to understand what your current monitoring strategy is. So we've already identified the step number one, a couple different ways that we can build out those requirements. Of course, crown jewel analysis, we talked about that. The next one is really to develop that collection plan. You implement the plan, test, and update accordingly. The collection management framework is not a one and done methodology. It's a framework that keeps moving forward. Now, what the CMF allows you to do is to answer a lot of different questions. So essentially, where are my host and device log? Are we actually logging the right settings? That's actually another part of the CMF that not really getting into here, but logs are nice, but you really need is the information about those logs. So even though you're logging a Windows host, for example, maybe it's a critical server, can you detect the PowerShell scripts, those kind of things, and memory type, processes and so forth. So even though you're logging it, you have to understand what you're logging with. Now, the next thing is around, can we detect both host level and network level activity, activity group behaviors, and again, crown jewels allows you to focus in that area. Now, quickly here, when you can do this, you can begin to build out a different ways of looking into your environment. And this is just one of those ways of, normally as I work with different customers and so forth, begin to build out that initial visibility piece, if you will, for their environment, where you can kind of group different systems together and to understand, initially, what is our current monitoring strategy? What can we detect for how long? Those kind of things. And this really helps you to build out that awareness to go, okay, if something happened in my environment 30, 45 days ago, 90 days ago, do I have the data to answer those critical questions? And oftentimes you don't, but that's okay. Again, let's begin to move our strategy forward and begin to develop those types of, that environment that we can do that with. So the next thing you do is you normally, once you've identified where you're at, now let's begin to build out that strategy. So here, maybe you've got an OT SIM now, you're collecting these logs that are aggregated at a central location, but we're missing a critical piece of the puzzle of our information. Because here we may be detecting host level activity, but we're actually missing, the key critical areas in our environment, which are actually the network monitoring piece. This is one of those areas that really hit home when I took the ICS 515 when it was, I think, alpha or beta class many years ago. And it was just, it really resonated with me around that network monitoring piece and the importance of getting that right. Now, with that, so we've talked about, host logging and also network logging. And this is just an example, if you will, of looking at, xenotime and kind of overlaying, what you can actually detect from a device perspective and then from a network perspective. And again, I've been very, very lenient on this mapping here, kind of trying to say that, devices, many of the ICS devices could actually, perhaps detect more than some of them are capable of doing. Some newer devices can do very, very good logging. A lot of older ones cannot. So therefore, monitoring at the network is normally our only option on a lot of these areas. But this does allow you to, again, overlay an activity group with your vertical, and then overlay your monitoring capabilities from both a device and also a network perspective. And so this gets into sensor placement. So here, just an example, and you can kind of think of this as a normal operation or even an adversary operation, is a lot of people, when they think about, okay, where am I going to put my visibility in my environment? A lot of people say, well, let's just put it at a choke point where we can gather the most information. So if you think about this from a perspective here, like let's say I have a connection coming into a jump server, and then that connection makes it down to a SCADA or HMI. Well, putting a, or even from another perspective, looking at the communications that go on from HMIs to servers or historians, you might think of, okay, there's a lot of traffic going back and forth at this one core location. So I'm going to put a network security monitoring sensor in this environment here because I can detect a lot of traffic. Well, the problem is with this is, yeah, you're detecting a lot of traffic in your environment. You're getting good visibility and those kind of things. But we've already discussed the crown jewels are a little bit lower in the network. So that's where the communications between your actual SCADA out to your remote field device, if you will, PLCs or RTUs, actually at that SCADA front end, looking at that communication is what is most critical. Or when we consider that communication from an HMI to a DCS controller, or even from that DCS out to a PLC, those are really your critical communications and really where you require that other sensor. And again, this isn't to say that you need to go put sensors everywhere to get 100% visibility, but it is important to identify that we've looked at our crown jewels. We have a targeted plan to understand where our critical assets are and where we need to get visibility. So this is not me saying go out and detect everything. This is saying go out and detect what's important to you. And then also the information can come back into an NSM console for aggregation and so forth. You always want to have one spot in your environment where you can see this communication. And then also where you can get the information coming back. So oftentimes we see, a lot of people will put in network security monitoring sensors going back into a central location, and then from that location you're able to forward those events and those kind of things to OT or an IT/OT SIM for your SOC folks to look at it and monitor it. Again, though, this can all be an inbound. Oftentimes, this communication is roughly 5% or so, this metadata of the actual traffic. So you can put this inbound, or you can put it around the site on a monitoring network. But nevertheless, to get that information out into a location, as we've, a lot of other panelists have talked about today, so that our teams can be aware of what's going on, to have that visibility, to have that ability to react quickly in a timely manner. So again, when we see this, we can kind of look at our overall strategy here with the collection management framework, where we have both our network monitoring, our host log monitoring. We have visible, we have detections out to a year. What's recommended, of course, if you can't make that, more is better than or anything better than 7 to 15 days. Please do that. But again, our strategy really should be to push this out to this far, so we can begin to answer those key and critical questions in our environment. So just a couple of takeaways from this talk, here, really to make sure you can, you can answer that question for yourself. Are you under attack? I want to leave you with the ability to go out and to be able to really answer that question. If you can't do it today, then develop a strategy so you can do that. And what's important about this is so you can sleep well. Make sure that your systems are well protected, well defended. Next thing is to document a case, of course, your critical crown jewels. So we know we can answer that question. We can document our critical crown jewels. We know what's most important to our environment. Then we can begin to leverage the Mitre attack for the ICS framework. We can look at those activity groups that are targeting our vertical. Again, if you're not oil and gas, if you're electrical, you have electrum activity groups, other ones in manufacturing and so forth. Leverage what's out there in the community, leverage those free resources to begin to doing this in your environment. And then, of course, utilizing a methodology such as the collection management framework, so you can begin to understand your current optics ability today, and then develop a strategy what to do moving forward, maybe tomorrow, next year, and so forth. And then, again, just take all these thought processes together and to where you can actually utilize this in your environment. And so with that, I'll leave you with some resources here that I helped me develop this talk. Again, Mitre attack for ICS, mapping and that methodology. You also, on our website, on Dragos website, there's a lot of free resources where you can click around on different activity groups. It'll do the mapping for you. Of course, the ICS kill chain by Rob and Lee and Mike Asante, a wonderful paper on just understanding attacks. Again, so much good resources free for the community that you can leverage going back to work. And so with that, I just want to thank you so much for sticking around for the talk. Again, I absolutely love this community. And as many have mentioned, I wish I could see all of you face to face, but this will do for now. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. We have 5 minutes before we move into break, which again, I think with every talk we've had, there's so many questions in the hallway. So absolutely encourage you to go there. I will try to provide a couple of quick questions that hopefully you can either say, I'll talk about that in the hallway or address here. So one very easy one is going back to sort of the crown jewel analysis is utilizing a HAZOP report a good starting point for the crown jewel analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. So HAZOP, PHA, any one of those things are a great, there's a ton of work that's been done in most of our industrial facilities, and we can leverage that. So it's not just the knowledge or the awareness of staff, it's that knowledge that's been actually written down. And so, a lot of our industries, again, they require a certain review every 5 years or so. And so, leveraging that is definitely where we would need to be. Yeah.
All right. We'll do this lightning round quickly.
Awesome.
Just your comparison, as I know throughout your career working with ISA and IEC and 62443 and kind of the zone and conduit partitioning and architectures, how would you compare those things that you've used across time with crown jewel analysis?
Yeah, so I think it comes into play where even like with zone and conduits, you're identifying those critical areas and you're segmenting them off. And so you can definitely, I mean, crown jewel analysis is just one of those processes of identifying what's important to your process, and then from there you build up your capabilities, your security levels, if you will, when you're referring back to 6443 and so forth. So I mean, all of these things kind of work hand in hand. But crown jewels helps first identify that critical system, and now let's go, put the segmentation, let's go put the monitoring, all those kind of things around it.
That's great. I think we still have some time for maybe one or two more. Getting visibility and getting the capability of a collection from all of your different devices and kind of identifying what part of process or which subsystem is the most important to focus on. But as you sort of get that and you've architected it in, moving more into the operate and maintain side. So now you're doing collection, but you want to have a threat intel feed and you want signatures and behavior updates. Just looking at things that have happened with SolarWinds and kind of all the other security solutions in the operate and maintain cycle. Can you talk a little bit about, for critical infrastructure, appropriate ways to bring those new kind of dynamic signatures and intel feeds in?
Yeah, and most solutions out there today, I mean, if you're going to roll your own with a free solution or look to, many of the vendors out there for this, that they offer different ways of getting these feeds coming into the environment. Again, when you're monitoring your networks as well, it's all done passively or you're taking that information offline. I would say all passively, some active, but nevertheless, those feeds coming into your centralized location, that's metadata. And then you can overlay that with a lot of the feeds coming in from the threat intel from multiple different sources. So definitely you can architect that out by putting your central collector in a DMZ, proper segmentation, proper firewall rules, all those kind of things where you can get that information coming in a secure fashion so your teams can leverage it. And so it's not only leveraging it just from that side, but it's getting that split visibility between that OT and the IT systems.
Awesome. There are a number of other questions coming in. You're going to be very busy during break.
Sounds great.
There's one at the top that I'll ask just because we have 2 minutes left. So I'll think about how to pose this, either in sites that you worked or customers that you've worked with. Again, getting that collection and visibility is sort of a key achievement, and understanding what you own and operate. And then also comparing that to other security architectures, like implementing a unidirectional gateway or a data diode. Kind of now you've collected it and gathered it all, but can you talk a little bit about any implementations you've seen that are unique, where you can kind of merge technologies together? So leverage data diodes and unidirectional gateways, but also still get the information out that you need and have a capability to do some level of local response.
Yeah, and really, when I look at this, it's the use cases are twofold. Once the use cases are for the plant itself, and then for the monitoring team. So often, as you see larger organizations, they'll have plant staff that's boots on the ground, and then they'll have your SOC operations folks, so forth, that they're looking at this maybe from a plant perspective or even from a global perspective for multiple plant feeds. So definitely, you can utilize these systems where the people that are at the facilities can have visibility, and then this information can also be pushed forward through a data diode or something like that into a different system. So there's many different ways to architect this out, but I have seen different areas where they utilize those capabilities to do that. So you're again, proper segmentation of information flows moving up into different SOCs and those kind of things. So definitely different ways to do it. Of course, depends on vendors and all those different solutions. So
that is awesome. We are right at time. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for everything you do for us in this community. Thanks for the CTF. Just a big virtual hug for you from far across the world.
awesome.